We tend to think of the US and Canada as having the most stable, friendly border in the world. But what happens when a pretty routine trade dispute over something like steel and lumber suddenly blows up into a conflict over the one resource nobody can live without, fresh water? In this explainer, we're going to look at how this simmering conflict is fast becoming a major test of sovereignty, survival, and really, the future of the entire continent.
It all kicked off with a simple request and a very firm refusal. The United States, facing some of the worst droughts in its history, looked north to its water-rich neighbor for a little help. And Canada's response? A clear, resounding no. That one word, right there, set the stage for a confrontation that is totally reshaping the relationship between two of the world's closest allies.
And the two positions couldn't be more different. On one side, you have U.S. leaders who started talking about Canadian rivers as untapped relief, framing it as just a logical solution to a really desperate problem. But Canada? They pushed back, and they pushed back hard. Their position, stated in unusually blunt terms, was that its lakes and rivers are national assets and are absolutely not pipeline feedstock to solve somebody else's drought. The battle lines were officially drawn.
So, you have to ask, how did we even get here? I mean, a conflict like this doesn't just appear overnight. The tension over water is really a symptom of a much, much broader strategic shift. To really understand what's happening now, we need to trace the path from tariffs to taps.
The whole thing started not with water, but with economics. A series of trade disagreements created this atmosphere of friction and, frankly, mistrust. And that set the perfect stage for the conflict to mutate, to change from being about manufactured goods to a resource that is far more fundamental. Let's walk through the key steps.
So first, it started with U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel and lumber. Pretty standard stuff. But in response, Canada started looking for ways to rely less on the U.S., developing alternate trade routes, like its Arctic gateway at the port of Churchill. Then came the real pivot. America hit pause on talks to modernize the Columbia River Treaty, essentially turning a 60-year partnership into a bargaining chip. And that was the final straw. It's what prompted Canada to declare its water a sovereign asset, completely off the negotiating table. Now, this wasn't just some diplomatic spat you read about in the headlines. The consequences hit the U.S. economy almost immediately, sending a real shockwave through key industries, and eventually right down to the wallets of everyday consumers.
And the impact was felt all across the country. California's Central Valley, which grows a massive portion of America's food, had quietly been banking on getting that extra water. Without it, harvests shrank. Out in Arizona, those high-tech semiconductor fabs, which are incredibly thirsty, by the way, they suddenly faced a whole new level of uncertainty. Even energy producers and Midwest manufacturers felt the squeeze as water for things like cooling and processing became a lot harder to secure.
And this wasn't some abstract economic issue. No, that stress on agriculture translated directly into higher prices at the grocery store. With smaller harvests because of tighter water allocations, the cost of some fruits and vegetables jumped by an average of 15%. That's a real hit for families who are already dealing with inflation.
There's a quote that just sums this all up perfectly. You can subsidize factories, but you cannot subsidize the rain. It's such a stark reminder that while economic policy can help build factories, it is totally powerless against the realities of nature. You just cannot create a resource like water out of thin air.
This whole conflict isn't just a North American issue. It's really a window into a massive global shift. What we're witnessing is access to fresh water becoming the 21st century's main source of geopolitical power, a lot like oil was in the 20th.
For decades, the global power map was drawn around who had the oil reserves. It was that simple. But now, in a hotter, drier world, that map is being completely redrawn around watersheds. And nations that have abundant fresh water are suddenly finding themselves with a new, incredibly powerful form of leverage.
And the US-Canada dispute? It's just one piece of a growing global trend. If you look across the world's major river systems, from the Mekong in Southeast Asia to the Jordan in the Middle East, tensions between the countries upstream and the countries downstream are escalating. It's rewriting regional politics and creating a whole new set of flashpoints.
And here is Canada's new strategy in action. See, they're not interested in exporting bulk water. That's not the play. Instead, they're exporting value, things like agricultural goods, manufactured products, all made with their reliable water supply. And this makes them an incredibly attractive partner for water-scarce powers like China and Europe, who can basically outsource their own scarcity by just importing Canadian goods. It's a really smart move.
So,
With the Canadian tap turned off, the United States is really being forced to look inward. And the path forward, well, it's going to require a set of difficult, expensive, and politically very challenging domestic solutions to build up its own water resilience.
The options are pretty clear, but none of them are simple. You've got desalination plants on the coasts, which are totally feasible, but they use massive amounts of energy. There's large-scale water recycling, which is super effective, but it faces some public perception hurdles. Precision agriculture could dramatically cut water use, but it requires a huge upfront investment. And underneath all of that are the really tough political choices about who gets the water and how much they have to pay for it.
And this fight, it isn't just external, it's also happening internally. Take the Great Lakes Compact. It's this landmark agreement designed to protect the world's largest freshwater system from being drained. But now, you've got these drought-stricken Sunbelt states putting pressure on their neighbors to loosen those protections, creating a massive domestic tug-of-war over this vital resource.
Which brings us to the fundamental question for the future of North America. This whole dispute has revealed a brand new reality. So will the U.S. invest in its own resilience and maybe partner with Canada to manage the resources they share? Or is this just the beginning of recurring crises, where water becomes a constant point of friction? In a world that's defined by scarcity, the lasting power is going to belong to those who treat fresh water not as a bargaining chip, but as the absolute foundation of everything else.